Steve Jobs introduced the iPad as the future of computing on January 27, 2010. This was the first time we saw the iPad, but not the pitch. The iPhone, iPod, and the Mac came with similar promises. And presenting them was Jobs. After building them with his partners in crime at Apple, he'd say, "It's better to be a pirate than join the Navy." Navigating the company to a value of $1 trillion by dominating segments, if not the entire markets of devices like phone, watches, tablets, computers, and music. Apple's fall events have been the stage for the biggest announcements for a decade now. So this fall, we are talking Apple, the $1 trillion company. That's 1 followed by 12 zeros, or roughly 10 of Ambani's Reliance Industries. Apple has made some of the most iconic and innovative devices in personal computing history. And this week, we are looking at the people and products that made it possible. It all started with Mac and Steve Jobs' vision of making computing accessible, more accessible. Maybe not in price, but in ease of use. This is Mac and Steve, and today's episode is about Steve Jobs. And also the teams and tech at Apple built during his leadership.
It is the honor of a lifetime to be the first to welcome you to the Steve Jobs Theater. There's not a day that goes by that we don't think about him.
A company that made the decision to put the iPad development on the shelf to get moving on the iPhone, and use the same OS with slight modifications, which was earlier made by modifying the Mac OS X. The Mac was one of Jobs' early press conferences that set the tone for future keynotes and conferences. Not just Apple's, but the entire industries. The keynote theatrics and formats are now replicated by Google, Samsung, Microsoft, Xiaomi, Facebook, and everyone. But there are some things so iconic that neither of them might be able to match up to. Steve Jobs carried a floppy drive in a shirt pocket to prove the portability of the software, and decades later, a laptop in an envelope. So, while Microsoft was busy dancing at the Windows 95 launch, Jobs was paving way for future animation technology. At the time, he was at Next, a company that he set up after being forced out of Apple. He then sold the company back to Apple and made his way to leadership, taking charge of the old ship which had been struggling in his absence. This was a different Apple. His co-founding engineer, Steve Wozniak, had been gone for a decade. The Mac was facing tough competition in the market, and the iPhone launch was a decade away. Enter Jony Ive, the designer of Apple's most iconic devices, and recently the entire smartphone industry. So, Apple starts its comeback journey with the announcement of adding support for MS Office on the Mac, which makes Office the universal productivity software, but also gets Apple a bump in the cash pile.
Apple has decided to make Internet Explorer its default browser on the Macintosh. Since we believe in choice, we're going to be shipping other Internet browsers as well on the Macintosh.
They use it to buy and build lots and lots of things. The video editing software, Final Cut Pro, the iMac computers, OS X software, iTunes, iPod. By now, Apple wasn't just making software and hardware, but also an ecosystem of services on the content distribution. With iTunes letting you buy music on the computer and syncing it with your iPod to listen on the go, it got people to download 1 billion songs in less than 3 years, which became 10 billion in another 4 years. This time with a little or a lot of help from the iPhone and MacBook. Apple had spent the last decade strengthening its business and would raise to $1 trillion in the next decade. but Jobs would only be around to see it till 2011. Since then, Apple has only launched one new kind of device, the Apple Watch, in 2015. Unlike Jobs' 1997 to 2011 phase at Apple, when the iMac, Mac Pro, iBook, MacBook, MacBook Pro, MacBook Air, iPod, iPod Touch, iPhone, iPad, and a bunch of other accessories were launched to go along with these devices. Steve Jobs had two stints at Apple, one building it and the other navigating it to the journey it sails on today. And this time, even though the reason was medical, the terms he would leave on would be his. And that's all, folks, for this episode. Not the Mac and Steve series. There are 3 more episodes you can tune into every week, on your way to work or back. Just visit Outlook Magazine's YouTube page, a search for the playlist Mac and Steve by Outlook on YouTube.